Hello and welcome to Candice Recommends with myself, Candice Mama. Today's guest is someone I absolutely love and admire. They're someone who has published 4 books. They're an international speaker. They've helped thousands and thousands of people find their joy and achieve tremendous success. They are Justin Cohen, someone I'm so privileged to call a good friend of mine. And without further ado,
Pretty good, pretty good. As you can see, the wild man of coronavirus. Uh, I,
I don't think I've ever seen it like this. I'm saying,
no, no. This is the Jufro unleashed.
well, you are rocking it.
Thank you, Ken. And you are looking as exquisite as ever. I'm not quite sure how you do it. We'll ask no questions.
Yeah, I shave my own hair. That's why I don't turn around ever. Luckily, no one has to walk behind me. So it's a mess back there. Okay, Jess, there's so much I want to speak to you about. But before we get started, I want to do a rapid fire round with you.
Sure.
Fantastic. Okay,
I'm
so
adjusting lighting here, putting my studio lights. They should give us a little bit more light. Cool.
Are you feeling comfortable?
I'm feeling comfortable, even if I'm not entirely looking it.
Okay, so rapid fire round. Okay, describe yourself in 3 words.
Wow, describe myself in 3 words. Okay, and that should be rapid. Clearly not fast. Slow, thoughtful, deliberative. Yeah, I probably would go with those actually. Very appropriate for the moment. Probably throw in passionate. That's 4. You could take out slow if you wanted to be generous, but I think it would probably be appropriate to keep it in.
You know what? I will actually add humble, because if I were you, I'd be ranting off a couple more things. So what's your favorite song of the moment?
Favorite song. Gosh, it's crazy because I really one of the things that I really enjoy is working out every day to uplifting trance music, but it's a real travesty that I actually can't tell you who I'm really listening to, because I just get these mixes from Apple, which are beautifully put together, and I can't even begin to tell you who they're from. So I would just have to say extended trance music. Yes.
Well, I'll take you up on that, because even if you listed someone from the trance world, I probably wouldn't know who they are.
Takes 2 of us.
So what's your favorite book of all time?
Favorite book of all time, spoiled for choice here, but would have to be Anna Karenina, Leo Tolstoy. Russian literature is in my blood, and it's one of those books I've read a couple of times. There's nothing quite like a great novel to just absorb the attention. What I love is the way in which we can escape and get into another world, another time, into another person's shoes. Just nobody comes closer to God than a great novelist, in the ability to construct this world in which you just are enveloped by. So yeah, Anna Karenina.
And I actually want to elaborate on that a little bit later in the interview. But I want to ask you my last rapid fire question, which is, what does the world need more of?
I'm going to go with the first word, which is going to sound a little cliche, but I'm going with it because I just don't know what else there could be that we need more of. Love.
That's actually not as cliche as you'd think. I think it's actually very true. And yeah, I know.
Yeah,
and I think.
Sorry, Ken. Yeah, I think, perhaps it's also what we mean by love, and yes, definitely being more pro-social and caring about each other, but caring about ourselves. That love your neighbor as you love yourself. I think we often forget the yourself part there, you know.
Wow.
And I think it really is. I mean, it's one of those great pearls of wisdom. I think I'm not sure to what extent it's possible to really love others until you really do love yourself. Crazy Jufro and all.
No, but coming actually to that love element, I mean, you've interviewed some phenomenal people, and one of those phenomenal people, you two actually share that sentiment, which is Chief Justice Mogoeng Mogoeng. And I recall being privileged enough to be in the audience when the two of you were speaking about the world needs more love.
Yeah, that was a beautiful event. Of course, you and I were co-hosting that event for the Risk Association of South Africa, and it was quite a surprise to get that opportunity to interview the great man himself. And I think you and I were just both so moved. You know, I think sometimes we look at these jurists and you kind of wonder, you know, who they are, how they got there, and of course there was some controversy about his appointment initially. But boy, did he surprise us, right? What a man of hearts! You could just feel the heart, yeah. And you're right. He, you know, this is. I think sometimes when you get in, no disrespect to lawyers, but I think sometimes the law can become a substitute for your own innate sense of compassion and your own innate sense of what's right and what's wrong, you know. And I think it's so important that we don't, you know, you look at Donald Trump. Donald Trump is famous for using the law to do what he needs to in business, and often what that demonstrated is that you can use the law, but you can use it unethically. You know, you can do what is legal, but what is wrong. And I think what the Chief Justice showed us is really that each of us, the responsibility is on us, not just to follow the law, but to really do what we feel to be right. Yeah. And that means, I think, connecting with our emotion. It isn't just this kind of legalese. It's about really connecting with our love and our compassion for one another.
And I mean, I think just having the privilege of knowing you, and for me, both of you and the Chief Justice share so many commonalities and being men of honor and really following what it is that, you know, as you just said, you know, what you know is right and true. And so I think I want to lead into, where did it all start for you guys? Like, how did you get into this career path of helping people?
Well, I struggled as a kid. You know, I struggled emotionally, and my big awakening was studying psychology. You know, psychology really switched the lights on for me. Suddenly, I realized that one didn't just have to take the way that one felt for granted. You know, that we actually had a tremendous amount of influence over our own mental states and our own emotions. You know, I think a lot of us live with the sense that the way that we are and what we feel is determined by the external world. And of course, there is an external world, and the external world has a very significant influence. But really, the core insight for me is that it's less important what happens and far more important how we respond to what happens. But many of us don't know how to respond. You know, we don't actually have the means to respond in the best way possible. You know, you may or may not know this. My father was violent. He was violent to my mother. He was violent to us as kids, and he was always repentant afterwards. Always repentant. In fact, he would often be in tears about what he had done. You know, this was not his behavior was not congruent with his sense of self. But I remember having this distinct sense that he just didn't know how to manage his emotional state. Now, I'm not exonerating my father's behavior. I'm not exonerating anybody who is abusive. If you're in an abusive relationship, get out. Okay, we're not in this. There's no debate. But I could also feel this real empathy for my father, who had, you know, and if we look even at the neuroscience here, we've all got a higher brain In our high brain, our prefrontal neocortex, we have morality, we have cognitive function, we have analysis, and then we've got our lower brain, and that's the reptilian brain that we share with reptiles. That's where you've got your fight or flight response. That's where you have that trigger. That's when we talk about losing your temper, you literally lose your prefrontal neocortex. We actually see glucose, blood, oxygen, neutrons shifting to the lower brain, right? And it's how do we activate that higher brain? You know, we think about ourselves as being this kind of unified, consistent character. But we all know that each one of us, no matter how good somebody is, they have times when they are angry or frustrated and lose it. And no matter how bad somebody is, they have times when they're good. You know, I have to think about Oscar Pistorius. Oscar Pistorius really rang a bell for me because, you know, my father ran after my mother with a loaded gun. I mean, you know, had things been different, you know, he could have shot her. Fortunately, that never happened. But this is maybe going to be difficult for people to hear. But I felt a certain empathy, of course, for River Steenkamp, but I also felt a certain empathy for Oscar because because let's face it, whether he did this intentionally or not, whether it was out of anger, whether it was out of fear, he lost his prefrontal neocortex. Now, again, not to exonerate what he did. I'm going to say that again, just for anybody who's not getting that. I'm not exonerating. He needs to go to all of the above. But I can also feel some compassion, right? And I can also say, yeah, this is not something in that moment, yes, you can say he wanted to do, but there was a disconnect with his higher self, right? And we all have that. And Oscar Pistorius was caught out on his worst day, right? Well, most people haven't seen my worst day. You know, I'm lucky. People haven't seen me at my worst. Because what they do is they get to see me at my best when I'm with the wonderful Candace Mama. They don't see me on my worst day. Because fortunately, on that day, I didn't do anything as drastic as that. But I might have said something, or I might have behaved in a way that I would really not be proud for people to know, right? And so I think there's something about also owning, you know, the shadow, you know, as Jung said, owning our shadow, because you can't change what you don't acknowledge, you know. But once you acknowledge it, like my father acknowledged, my father knew, and he had a tremendous amount of self-loathing about this, but he couldn't, you can't do better if you don't know better. He didn't know how to do better. So long answer to your question, but I guess what really inspires me is that I know how these insights from the personal development field, from psychology, have transformed me. And I just know that so many other people could get that benefit. And they don't have to study psychology. That's why I started writing essentially personal development books, because I think we can make it very accessible to people. And of course, that's what we're doing through this interview.
No, I mean, just firstly, thank you so much for your vulnerability and your openness in answering that, because I think the reason you had to keep saying, no, I'm not exonerating, I'm not saying it's okay, I'm not saying these things, it's similar to my line of work, right? Which is exactly the line of seeing Eugene de Kock's empathy, even though he had killed my father. And I find that people saw it as, you know, I'm, you know, celebrating this murder, or I'm excusing him, which was never the case, right? But I think what you touch on is that sense of each and every human being, as much as we'd like to see ourselves as these perfect angelic beings, all of us have triggers. All of us have moments where, given the right circumstances, given the proper moment, we may not act in the best way. And so thank you for just elaborating that and just sharing the psychology behind it, but also sharing your own personal experience. I think it's so crucial. So Jess, you've written 4 books. 4 books.
Yeah, I'm trying to track, actually. The 6th book is coming out this week. It's you know, Ken, writing books is an addiction. I'm just hoping that selling books will become a bigger addiction, because they're very different skill sets. But yeah, I love writing, you know, and I know you do too. I think writing a book is just about the best way to really comprehend a field. Yeah, you know, I think it was Socrates who said the best way to learn is to teach. Yeah, it's by sharing. I teach what I need most to learn, man. You know, sometimes I feel like a hypocrite, because I don't always do what I say, but I try my best to do that. And when I don't, I'll own it. But this is it, you know, being a human is a messy business. And so we're trying to be better. You know, that's what this is about.
Wow. And I think that's all of us, right? We teach, especially I think when you put yourself in the front line of any subject matter, I think people automatically assume you must know everything about happiness. You must know everything about relationships. And I love that you're saying that, you know what, sometimes I fall short and it's okay, right? Because I think it's going to give so many people out there moments be like, oh, thank God. You know, I'm doing
it's not sometimes, it's oftentimes. But I think, again, you know, one of the keys that I've spoken about for many, many years now is self-awareness. You know, I think it's just, it's being able to own it. And again, you can't change what you don't acknowledge. So, you know, if you can say, look, this is what happened. And I love being able to say it, and I really, truly do. I love being able to say, I screwed up. You know, I got it wrong. Because if you can never say that you screwed up, you can never say you're smarter today than you were yesterday. Yeah, I want to be smarter. I want to be smarter. So if I can't say I'm wrong, you know, and the fact is, it seems so absurd not to be able to acknowledge that, because, you know, I mean, who's perfect? I mean, Donald Trump, yes. I mean, he's perfect, but not everybody can be, you know. So yes, you do get those rare individuals. And, you know, Ken, maybe on this point, and I know I'm taking a couple of swipes at Donald. I think Donald has so many lessons for us. And in fact, in Winning with Relationships, my new book, my publisher actually said, Justin, you know, you've got about 3 or 4 references in this book. And there's a few references to Jacob Zuma as well, because I really do think we can learn a lot from, you know, from these leaders. And, you know, one of the things we learn is that leadership doesn't build character, leadership reveals character. Yeah. So choose your leaders very carefully, and don't assume that you're putting them into a nice school for leadership. They're going to be more of what they are. But I came across something really fascinating last week, which concerns me, because, you know, we talk a lot about the power of positivity in our field, and we know that positive and optimistic people are happier, they're healthier, they're more successful, there's just so many, you know, good metrics there. But what I found very interesting and a little disturbing is that there's a famous book that many of your viewers will be familiar with, which is written by Norman Vincent Peale, called The Power of Positive Thinking. And the secrets is really considered the kind of the lineage of that view. Now, let me just say, lots of great value there. But what's so interesting is Norman Vincent Peale was a pastor, and he was the Trump pastor. How's this? He was the Trump family pastor. And very early on, Donald Trump became a very strong adherent to the power of positive thinking. And what I found so fascinating, I didn't know this, right? This just came out a couple of weeks ago. And what I found so interesting is that if you look at the way he's talking about the coronavirus, and the way that he runs his administration and his leadership, he will never admit he's wrong, right? He literally said, I don't take responsibility. Those were his words. I do not take responsibility, when he was asked about many of the things that have gone wrong. So you'll never see him apologizing. You'll never see him taking responsibility. You'll never see him admitting that something was wrong. You'll never see him actually acknowledging the real challenge that is here, right? He'll tell you that, you know, the coronavirus will miraculously go away. Literally, those are his words. He'll tell you that 100,000 deaths, that's what we're facing this week. And he will tell you that this is good, and that his administration is 10 out of 10. That's what his words, 10 out of 10, right? And that he's getting great reviews, right? And there's all this stuff which sounds so delusional, right? And you're like, what is going on? Is this guy cuckoo? Like, he's literally totally out of touch with reality. And then I connected to, you know, Norman Vincent Peale, Power of Positive Thinking. This is the dark side of the power of positive thinking. This is the dark side, where we will not acknowledge when we are wrong. We will not acknowledge mistakes. We will not face up to challenges. We will not say, you know what, right now, actually, things are shite. It sucks, right? And I need to deal with that, right? I'm not saying get dragged down to that and with despair, but this is delusional, and you can see how dangerous it is. So I think, you know, yes, I'm a positive, optimistic person, but that doesn't mean ignoring reality. Doesn't mean ignoring when you screw up, right? Doesn't mean ignoring the challenges. In fact, if we do not face those challenges, we can't do anything about them. And that's really, I think, the problem here.
Wow. I mean, I would have never put the two together. I think it might put a spin for the whole world if together, right? But just tell me, we spoke about these two leaders, you know, the former president, Jacob Zuma for us, and Donald Trump currently. What is it about these two men? I mean, with Jacob Zuma, I can clearly see a sense of charisma that wins you over. Even if you don't like the guy, there's something about him that you find charming and you almost want to root for him, right?
Mm.
And so what is it about these two leaders that you think the world was so enchanted by that we overlooked everything else and still put them into power?
Yeah, so if you want to predict American presidential elections, and actually, I mean, unfortunately in South Africa we don't vote for our president, but you can see even in the internal election that takes place within the ANC, you can actually see pretty much the same thing. But certainly, if you go back to every American presidential election, you will see that the better connector always wins. So Hillary Clinton, just renowned not to be a great connector. You know, probably the most qualified person for the American presidency in history, because she had been a senator for New York, she had been a foreign secretary, first lady, unbelievable expertise, breadth of expertise. I know that some people would say that maybe there was sexism at play there, and I think it's quite possible. I suspect that if Hillary Clinton was male, you know, that may not have been the case. But if she was male, then Bill, you know, would have been the first American president married to a man, you know, which itself would have been pretty out there. And perhaps even problematic that the first president, you know, necessarily had to have been a first lady, and the whole dynastic politics also concerns me. But really the point is that as great as her experience was, I wonder, even if she was a man, I'm still not convinced, because she didn't quite have the level of connection of Trump. Now, Trump, you might not like his approach, his style, but he connects very well with people who are angry, who are fired up, who are ready to beat down the system. He connects with those people. He might not connect with you and me, but he connects with those people. Whereas Hillary, you know, connected, of course, with many people, but just didn't have that same strength of rapport. You know, you see it with Bill Clinton. I mean, Bill Clinton was the master connector. Clinton connected a little too much. Barack Obama, you know, every one of them. And of course, Jacob Zuma. Jacob Zuma, phenomenal connector. 25 children later, boy, he knew how to connect. But he really, you know, I remember a friend of mine met Jacob Zuma, determined not to like him, and said, man, I got to tell you, he's really cool. I like him, right? So, like, having seen everything he'd done, he couldn't but like him in his presence. Why? Because, you know, he makes you feel like the center of your world. Eye contact, the smile, all those good things that create connection and rapport. So there was a beautiful study in the States asking people, who would you want? It was called the beer test. Who would you want to go for a beer with? At the time, this was between George W. Bush and John Kerry. John Kerry, again, you know, considered really to be a far smarter guy, far more policy driven. But most people said they'd rather go for a beer with George W. Bush. He was the guy you sort of felt that you could connect with, right? So connection is absolutely critical. And yes, Ken, that's the problem, is that you can be a great connector, but you can be an, you know, SOB, you know, you can be just, you know, immoral. You can, you know, and you know, it's fortunate you had Nelson Mandela, who was a great connector and who was a, you know, a moral human being. But we got to be very careful here, because we can have very charismatic Johnson in the UK. I do not, you know, Johnson is, I wouldn't call him a Trump. He's a tremendous intellectual. He's got wonderful attributes. But quite frankly, I don't think he's moral. I mean, this is a man who literally was kicked out of his newspaper because of plagiarism. This is a guy who, you know, he's clearly, his focus is more on power, and he's been very effective in getting there. But boy, is he charismatic. Boy, is he a connector. So it's going to be a tough call for people to say to people, you know, put that aside and vote on values and morality, because it is just such a strong intuition that we have, this strong connection that we have to people like this, you have this level of connection and charisma, but it's dangerous. Hitler had it too.
Well, yeah, and I think for me, this actually brings us back to where we started in the conversation about, how we think of ourselves as human beings as different from the rest, right? Your decision making would be different. What you do in a certain moment would be different to anyone else. But if you realize that you connect to people based on how you feel and not so much the mental side of yourself, because you can clearly see someone is wrong or not right. This comes to voting for president, that you can see someone may not be the perfect fit for a position, but because they make you feel a certain type of way, you still trust them to a certain degree. Would I be correct in that assessment?
Oh, without a doubt. And this was my previous book, Pitch to Win. When you look at in business, when you're out there pitching for business, what we see is that the pitch that wins, if you just have the two pitches on paper versus somebody coming up and delivering it, well, when it's on paper, it's purely based on the content of the pitch. But when you do it in person, it's if you've got a more passionate, excited person with greater, because the number one factor is energy and enthusiasm. So you got somebody who's brimming with energy and enthusiasm and connection. The one that loses in the paper pitch will, if that's delivered by somebody with energy and enthusiasm, that one will actually win when it's delivered verbally. So this is not logical. I saw we've got Jennifer Stoller on the listening to, what do we say? Listening, viewing, connecting, engaging. If it's Jen, it means that, what did you say, Kat?
On live.
Online. Thank you. This, we're different generations, Kat, so I need you to help me with the lingo. Online, I was going to say in the hall, in the room, but thank you. But I saw Jennifer saying there, law, and if I'm not mistaken, I think she said law is not logic, or law is not purely logic. Well, if anybody's watched a Trial by Media, and I strongly recommend it, Trial by Media on Netflix at the moment. I mean, it's absolutely crazy, man. You can literally see cases that this one should have lost, that one should have won. So why did the one that should have lost win? Because you had a lawyer who created an emotional connection with the jury. So we are emotional creatures. We think we're rational, but actually we're rationalizing creatures. We will rationalize our decisions after making them on an emotional basis.
Oh, I actually love that. And I actually want to take that point and actually speak about what you're currently doing, because we are living in an interesting, to say the least, time. And all of us, of course, have experienced some forms of anxiety before, but I don't think it's a scale. And so you launched Transcenda. Do you want to tell us just a little bit about what exactly is that?
Yeah, look, firstly, even before, I actually created Transcenda before COVID. And let's just talk the world before COVID for a moment, because that's pretty shocking in and of itself. 30% of people will experience a full-blown anxiety disorder within their lives. 30%. Okay, that's COVID aside. The rates of mental illness are really radically increasing. Now, part of that may be due to reporting, but there's a lot of controversy about it. We're not entirely sure. It does seem, though, that your average rates of anxiety and depression in the world today, pre-COVID, are higher than what they were 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. In fact, some research even suggests that they may have been higher even than World War II. And then you go like, well, that is absolutely, how can it be higher than in World War II? So the reason, as I say, partly may be better reporting, but it also seems that we have certain stresses and pressures in the world today that they didn't have then. For one, we have a far more incendiary news cycle. So we're constantly being inundated with very negative news. Now, the reason that happens, and I just had a call come in, so I hope that did that kind of just go all. And I did my don't disturb, Ken, so I'm going to need better instructions. But clearly, I haven't got that right. I need very clear directions. You know, this older generation we need to be shown step by step. So why would this be the case? So you've got Facebook. Mark Zuckerberg, I think, is now the third richest man in the world. Facebook operates on advertising, and the advertising goes to where where eyeballs go. And it turns out that eyeballs gravitate towards negative news far more than positive news. And that's got to do with the nature of the brain. The brain is less, think about it, we very seldom go up to in fact, we never go up to somebody and say what's right, but we'll go up and say what's wrong. And the reason is the brain figures what's right will take care of itself. What's wrong needs to be attended to because that determines your survival. So we have what we call a negativity bias, right? And this is why there's a lot of that, paradox here. I was just dissing old, power positive thinking. In fact, I wasn't dissing power positive thinking by Norman Vincent Peale, just the way it can then be distorted and turn into this monster when you're not prepared to notice what's wrong. But the truth is most of us are focusing more on what's wrong than what's right. And that actually is connected to a lot of anxiety and depression. And so Facebook preferences a lot of this negative news because that's what sells advertising, right? In the news, there's an expression, if it bleeds, it leads. And we actually see that positive news just doesn't activate as much of the brain as negative news, right? So you're trying to get eyeballs, throw negative news. So now if you're throwing this negative news, because that's what the brain tends to gravitate towards, but what it also does is it creates more distress and anxiety. So that's the one possibility. The other thing is right now, Instagram, social media. What we also have is this tremendous social pressure, about how many likes did I get and, how many people are listening and watching. And so I really hope we've got enough people. Otherwise, I'm going to get very anxious, very, very anxious. Please make sure that we have, it has added an additional social anxiety here, which is kind of crazy because you're thinking, on the one hand, is it news, the threat of nuclear annihilation, and on the other hand, is it not getting enough likes on my Instagram post? And this is the kind of crazy thing about anxiety. It's kind of like super glue, and it can stick to anything. So we have these increased rates. Now what's happened with Corona, and these stats come out of Time magazine, literally last week. I mean, I've read it a few times because they're so crazy. So here are the stats. And I want to be careful here because I'm going to share some very alarming statistics. And I don't want to also be that guy, right, who's kind of creating unnecessary anxiety about anxiety. So I'm actually feeling a little bit conflicted. But I guess what we're doing is we're saying this is reality. And the good news is there's something you can do about it. Okay, so let me first put reality in front of you. According to Time magazine, this time last year, about 4 to 5% of people would qualify as having extreme emotional distress that could in fact be categorized as a mental disorder. And the figure now is 28%. So it's gone from 4% to 28%. Now, having said that, this is conditional. In other words, it's related to the conditions that we find ourselves in the world. And it's very possible that once we all go back to work and COVID starts to, and I understand that it's going to get worse before it gets better, but the fact that we're moving out of social, there are three things driving this, but there's social isolation, economic difficulties, and then fear, of course, about the virus itself. And as these things, as we move out of social isolation, as economics start coming right, we're likely to move out of this phase, and things are likely to start to settle to some degree. But this is the reality that we find ourselves in right now. So extremely high rates of emotional distress. Transcend is a program that I put together that was really triggered by my own emotional distress related to something that happened a number of years ago. I won't get into right now because I think it's a bigger story. But the point is, I had been applying a lot of tools that I'd been teaching over many years, and they were not able to get me out of the downward spiral that I found myself in. And so that led me on this 5-year journey of in-depth exploration to really figure this thing out. And I always vowed that if I did, I would share it. And I have really encapsulated what I found in this program, Transcenda. And I now do free workshops once a week. So your viewers are able to connect with that, and I can give the website a little bit later. And then there's a program as well. So I'm having pretty good results with the program. And what I'm really liking is that there are people on this program who are dealing with panic attacks, with generalized anxiety disorder, with PTSD. So I really want to work with people who are really struggling. That's where I want to work, right? So most of my career, I've been helping people who are generally okay, who just want to realize their potential. And because of what happened to me, I now want to work with people who are really struggling emotionally, right? Because I think that there's a way out. And I didn't have that. I had some conventional ideas that had come to me through my psychology studies, which were helpful, but that were not able to really enable me to break through. And when I did, that was it. It just became my new life mission. And I really want to share this because I just feel like I went through years of unnecessary suffering and because this is not rocket science. It's actually not particularly different. It's not years and years of therapy. It's not cocktails of drugs. I'm not saying that those, if you're on therapy and you're on drugs, I'm not saying get off it. I'm just saying in my experience, that was not helpful. And I found an alternative way, and I really want to share that with the world.
Wow, Jess, and I will actually vouch for you in terms of, anything, you've never put out anything that I didn't find of tremendous value. And I'm not saying that as a friend, because before we became friends, I started work. And so I would really recommend people go on the program. Like you said, it's free, so people can come and test it out and see for themselves. Because I read some of the reviews, actually, of people commenting on the link, and they said things like, whoa, I just had such breakthrough, thank you. And I think for people to say that is not easy, because then they have to admit they had an issue that required a breakthrough, right? So for me, it's like people have to tune in, and I'll leave the links in all the social media platforms. But just if there was one thing in closing, if there was one thing you would ask people to do during this time, because like we said, it is a challenging time on an emotional front. Is isolation, economic hardships. If you could leave the listeners with something that they could do today that would actually just make them, move in the right direction, or change their mental thinking, or except join your course, obviously, because they have to do anyway to get more tools. But is there anything that you think that, could be of use to us at this time?
Yeah, there's a number of things, but I'm gonna leave you with this. If you need help someone. Yeah, because we've all got something to give, and there's nothing as empowering as having a positive impact on somebody else. In years to come, we are going to look back at this time, and we're going to say, did I show up with my best self? Yeah. I know it's not easy. But character is forged not in times of ease and in comfort. It's forged in times like these, in times of difficulty. This is our time to shine. This is our time to prove who we are. This is the time to actually step it up. As tough as it may be, step it up and reach out. And one of the best ways you can step it up for yourself is to step it up for somebody else. Now, that could be as simple as a kind word, as a random act of kindness, as a, hey, how you doing? As a reaching out to someone. Like you feel like right now you want somebody to reach out to you, reach out to somebody else. Pick up the phone. Hey, how you doing? Sometimes it's as simple as a smile. It really is. It's contagious that. Your happiness sows innumerable benefits on the world. And so when you go out there, think about it. When you're feeling better, you're compassionate, you're kinder, you're more loving. So give that to yourself. I think too often we see that as being selfish, whereas actually one of the most powerful ways you can help somebody else is to spread your own goodwill, and even when it something that I know is that it's far easier to act yourself into feeling than to feel yourself into action.
Ah,
So if you're not
wow.
feeling it right now, act it. I don't mean put on a big act. I mean, just go out there and connect with somebody. And be positively contagious.
Wow.
Not in,
Like,
I was going to say
wow.
not in the UJT way, but I can't help myself. Positively contagious and acknowledge, when you get it wrong. And that's okay. You can accept and love yourself even when you get it wrong. That's okay. I get it wrong all the time.
Yeah. No, I absolutely love that. And I think, I wasn't expecting that, but I mean, it is so profoundly true. For me personally, I've done it, for a very long time. And it's never felt to work. When I felt down about myself, I helped someone out. All of a sudden, I'm okay. I'll be, and not from help people so you feel up yourself, but it does really do something for the brain. It really does say that, oh, okay, my life isn't that bad. It almost puts life into perspective. And so thank you for that, Jess. Thank you for your time. Honestly, I say all the time that it is an honor to call you a friend, and I'm so honored you took this time to spend with myself and the listeners.
Karen, it's an absolute pleasure. And, you know that I'm going to say it anyway because I think it bears repeating all the time. There's absolutely nobody that I've ever had the privilege to meet, to know, who exemplifies what I think all of us need more of, which is forgiveness. You are an absolute inspiration, and you are often in my mind as a model of how to behave, because just nobody has done it to that degree. And the thing that I love so much is how unsentimental you are about it. Really, I love that. People might say, why do you love that about it? Because it's just so real, it's just so real. I just love, when we spoke about, what happened with Eugene was, I just love the way you said, I did this for me because I didn't want to hold on to this anger and resentment. Well, why do any of us want to hold on to this? Yeah. What are we getting out of it? And that has been such an important part of my life, and I carry that with me. I want you to know that, and I know so many other people do too. So it's been a real privilege. Thank you, Ken.
Oh, thank you, Jess. And I look forward to having you back later in the year to speak about your book when it's released.
Great.
And just before we say goodbye, just give the website, even though I'll share it anyway. Just give the website that people.
Sure. So it's www.transcenda.life. That's TRANSCENDA.life. www.transcenda.life. And what I would suggest is just sign up on the website. And then whenever I'm doing any of my group workshops, you will get an invitation to it. And I'd love to have your community on the call.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks again, Jess, and have a beautiful day.
Thank you, Ken. And you. Lots of love. Cheers,
Lots of love. Cheers, Jess. Bye.
Bye.
I mean, wow. Wow, 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 wow. Every bit of that conversation was so mind-blowing, and just understanding the psychology of how we think, how we feel, and how we make decisions was so powerful. So guys, once again, please follow the link and like Justin's page called Transcenda.life. Go subscribe. It's free. You will thank us later. I promise you on this. And if you've liked this video, please like, subscribe, and comment. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll speak to you